All right. Well, good. Well, we'll get started here. It's close enough to 9:30 on a Saturday morning, and there we go. The clock just struck 9:30. And good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Second Saturday Birmingham. My name is Judd Allen, and I'm going to be your host today. And this is our monthly series of webinars that we do, helping those going through the divorce process. And, our goal today in each one of these that I do every month is to provide nothing but clarity, and hopefully you walk away with some confidence no matter what stage you're at of this process. If you're here today because it's something that you've been thinking about for a long time, and now you're in that stage of kind of doing the info gathering and ready to pull the trigger, or you're going through it, or you just got out of it, I first want to say I'm terribly sorry that you're going through it. I've been through this myself about 10 years ago. And I know how impactful this kind of event can be on our lives and our money and things like that. Um, so today we are going to talk about the 12 pitfalls, financial pitfalls of divorce. And again, this is going to cover whatever stage of divorce that you may be experiencing right now. Maybe the settlement's done, or like I said, maybe you're in those kind of discovery stages, sort of wondering what step to take next, and some things that you are doing. A little bit about myself. I have been in the wealth management. I have been in this industry now for 22 years. I have been with the investment consulting group based right out of Birmingham, Michigan. And these webinars, we're going to have everybody from all over the country. So I have to reference it, exactly where we're at. But I've been doing wealth management now for 22 years. And 10 years ago, I experienced my own divorce, and I went through many of the same things that many of you are going through today that are going through divorce. My situation was really no different. However, what I didn't have and what I was not aware of at the time were people out there like me, certified divorce financial analyst. And in this case, I am a candidate for only a little bit much longer. But these other professionals that support people going through divorce. And I relied solely on my attorney through mine. And throughout my career, up until about a year ago, I started to sit with people that had their divorce settlements, and they were just unsure of what to do with the money or the house or capital gains if there was anything like that. So I pursued to make divorce financial planning a part of my practice. In fact, it's now solely pretty much what I focus on. And I believe that my experience going through the same thing that you're going through creates a tremendous amount of value. Who Second Saturday is? Second Saturday is a nonprofit organization based out of San Francisco, California. And one day I was just kind of going down the rabbit hole of divorce stuff and whatnot, and I came across Second Saturday, and I wanted to learn a lot more. Once I learned about their vision and what they were there to do, I bought in quickly. So Second Saturday was born 30 years ago, over 30 years ago now, by two women in the financial services industry who kind of stumbled across it much like I did. They started to help a few clients going through a divorce, and prospects coming in with a divorce settlement and not sure, not knowing really what to do. And that's when the light bulb kind of went off. And these two women said, "Hey, listen, there's something missing here. Whenever this happens, there's always somebody out there left caught holding a settlement who just was never in tune with the finances or anything like that. Divorces were just get in, see the attorney, get divorced, split the assets down the middle, whatever, and then be on your merry way." So they came up with wife.org, and the mission of that was to provide financial advice to primarily women that were coming out of divorce who really didn't have the background or the knowledge of all the operating pieces of the whole financial picture in the marriage. So they started Second Saturday. They started doing divorce workshops on the second Saturday every month, and they have not skipped a beat in 30 years. And now today it has grown nationwide, and individuals and professionals like myself are now second Saturday leaders. So I am a leader of Second Saturday. I do these divorce workshops every single month. Again, to provide the clarity and confidence and support those going through whatever stage of divorce. Every single month we will do a separate a topic, if you will. This month it's the finances. Last month we did co-parenting with another webinar partner. Next month we have coming up, we're going to do another financial piece on the real estate, things like that. We'll bring in attorneys and other law professionals, mediators, divorce coaches on each one of these series so they can provide their insight and what they do, and supporting individuals going through a divorce as well. So we're all here for a collaborative effort to give you everything you need, again, so you can go through this process as smoothly as possible, perhaps, maybe more making it more cost effective, but at least again, I want to stress the clarity and the confidence because when it comes to divorce, we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know, what we're going to end up with or anything like that. Um, so glad you're here today. All right. Um, The mission, though, at the end of the day, before we get into this, we want to change what divorce means, in America. And, again, we hope you walk away today empowered with information, with some knowledge. Maybe, you're ready to take that next step. And if it's talking to somebody like myself first or an attorney or anything like that, we hope that what you hear today is gonna help you, make that decision. But it's not all about what we see on TV and they have to be nasty and things like that. There's several forms of divorce, the divorce process, which I'm going to cover here in a little bit, that individuals can certainly go through. So. Alrighty. More information. There's tons and tons of resources on the Second Saturday website, on my website as well,jallenfinancial.com. But many, many resources for alimony, child support, the real estate, division of assets, therapy, all kinds of stuff in there on co-parenting. So many resources available to you at no cost at secondsaturday.com or jallenfinancial.com. We'll have some QR codes and websites and things for you at the end that you can scan with your phone right off the computer screen and get all that information. Um, what I want to do first, before I get into the nuts and bolts of all the financial pitfalls that we typically see and want you to try to avoid, I want to just kind of go over the divorce process a little bit and sort of what things happen, what things are going to come up, what things to consider. There's four different real ways you can approach divorce. Number one is the litigation, and that's the image that we get from television or Hollywood, that it's going to be this long, drawn out battle in court and all the attorney, everybody's going to be screaming at each other and all this kind of stuff. And, the truth is very, very few divorce cases actually will go through litigation or be, seen in front of a judge. Typically those are cases where there's just absolute no resolution, and, the judge is the only one that is left to make that decision for the divorcing couple. And even most times those are settled right on the courthouse steps outside. So very, very few, very little do divorce cases go to litigation. I'm not saying none of them do, some of them do, but not very many. Probably the most common is through mediation, and mediation divorce is where there is an uninterested third party kind of going back and forth between spouses and their lawyers, kind of the negotiator a little bit. It's not argued in a courtroom. It's usually, at an attorney's office or anything like that. That's exactly what my divorce was mediation, and there was a third party going back and forth, trying to negotiate the settlement and things like that. So that can be a less stressful process, more cost-effective process. Again, taking a divorce to court, the costs are absolutely astronomical. The average divorce in America nowadays, under mediation, can cost an average of ten to $15,000, if not a little bit more. Once you start stepping into the courtroom, you're talking 20,000, maybe more, at that point. So mediation is a very effective way to stay out of the courtroom, to negotiate a settlement between the divorcing parties with a third, uninterested third party. There's also the collaborative legal process, where essentially in a collaborative divorce, you have a professional from each one of their lanes. You'd have somebody like me in the finances, you'd have your attorney, maybe a therapist or whatever. And the idea here is that each one of us acts and we stay in our lane to negotiate the settlement in that way. Okay, now with collaborative divorce, there is no court, there is no, at any point, if there is any talk or mention that we're going to take this to the courtroom, the collaborative process is null and void. It ends right there and it defaults back to kind of the normal divorce process of you and your attorney. But again, collaborative divorce can be very, very cost effective with the legal representation all there. Maybe it's hiring a CDFA to help you do the financial affidavits and gather the assets and all that kind of stuff, calculate the income quadros on pensions and what have you. Then you're turning to a mediator for negotiation settlement or your attorney or something like that. So it's kind of this sort of team approach, if you will. Or the last one is do it yourself. You can jump online, get a paralegal to do as much as the paralegal can do. We call that divorce pro se. And it can be very common, it can be very common, especially in those areas of what we call gray divorce. And gray divorce is this new kind of buzzword out there because what we are seeing are couples at the ages of 50 or older, the kids are grown and gone, but couples at the age of 50 or older actually have the highest rates of divorce right now. It's astronomical how high the divorce rate is amongst couples in their 50s or older. So, and that's where we typically see a lot of the come in. We just want to do it this way and be done with that. And I would certainly caution anybody doing it on their own, without some kind of legal representation of some kind, because a lot of times, very, very hard to determine whether or not the settlement is fair. In the state of Michigan, it's not a equal division of assets. It's a fair, equitable division of assets. And there's a big difference there. And the settlements have to be fair. They're not cut down 50-50 and that's it. They certainly have to become fair. And that's where professionals like myself and attorneys and mediators and divorce coaches and everybody else really come into play to help that with that fair settlement. So those are the four main ways that you can approach divorce. If there's children involved, I'm sorry. This can be a hard part, but there are going to be child issues discussed, and typically the courts and divorce and things like that, it's all about the kids. And two main things that are discussed with the child issues are, of course, going to be the custody arrangements. And that is there's going to be legal and physical custody. Okay, the legal custody is going to be the custodial parent, and that's really important because tax filing status changes, things like that. There's also the physical custody, and that's what we would refer to as your parenting time, 50-50, 60-40, every other weekend, whatever. Okay, so there's two kinds of custody there that are going to be discussed. And there again, the schedules, how are those going to be decided? I have three boys, and that's a value that I bring because I bring the reality of what it's like having kids and schedules and all that kind of stuff. Being a single parent, it's a game changer. Life changes at that point. Managing schedules on your parenting days and things like that. So absolutely crucial, to be aware of all those little nuances that it is being a parent, all their activities and things. So, so those are hashed out in the beginning and you're not trying to figure it out after the divorce, and there's no kind of legal recourse or anything like that for parenting time. So, um, child support. All states have child support guidelines, and that's typically what most cases will go by. They will go by the state guidelines. And it'll determine, when that support ends, when it starts, what expenses are covered, what are not covered. Maybe it's medical or childcare, things like that are covered. And then again, what that child support does not cover. And again, that is something that, in the negotiation process of the physical custody time and things like that, those would have to be kind of negotiated, any extra costs. I can give you a great example. My kids play travel sports, and yes, I mean, there were some guidelines about costs of travel sports, but as time goes on and they evolve and they get better, they switch teams and leagues and new rules and all that sort of stuff, there's all these new things that, today we have to co-parent on and come to an agreement on. So, just because you sign on the dotted line, those child issues don't go away. They're always going to be, your children, and you're always going to be the parent, and none of that stops because of divorce. Um, Another topic that will be discussed perhaps is alimony. Now, there's a difference between child support and alimony, or, alimony can be called spousal support too. Okay. There is a difference, a major, major difference. And, the courts want to make sure that, there's no disguising or anything like that. So they keep them really separate. But how alimony is really determined, of course, it's going to be the lifestyle, they're going to take into consideration the lifestyles of each person, the payee's ability to pay, the needs, how alimony can be determined and how long it lasts. Also could be, what are the potential, what's the potential for career development, right? And now, if you have a spouse that stayed home for 25 years of a marriage and didn't go out there and work and go to school and things like that, they're going to be a candidate most likely for more alimony, because the likelihood of them going to, jump in get a 4-year degree and go on and get another, is pretty, it's pretty unlikely. It's maybe not all that realistic. So, but there may be alimony may be arranged where, it is set up for that certain time so that ex-spouse can maybe go back to school, get a designation, or whatever the case may be. So those are really kind of the nuances of how, alimony would be determined. So. But those are some issues that are going to be discussed. How it's taxed. Really, divorces pre-2019, there were tax consequences. They could deduct it and claim all this sort of stuff. But now today, it's not taxed anymore. Neither is child support. Okay. Now, property division. Here's the big one. Who's going to get what? Okay. And here again, it's not only about who gets what, but whose is whose. Who brought it in? What happened during the marriage? And what is that piece for? So there's a thing we call marital property and separate property. Okay. So marital property is really anything that was acquired during the marriage. It could be the appreciation of assets. It could be whatever. Anything really acquired during the marriage is what they would consider marital property. Separate property, a little bit different. That's what's ever brought into the marriage. So let's say there's a house owned or something like that, and you get married. That real estate is going to be separate property. Now, anything that happens during the marriage, such as the increase in real estate value, the equity, things like that, that is going to come up as a property division item when the divorce comes. So, real estate, the home, probably going to be the biggest asset to discuss uh, uh, during a divorce. And I'll touch upon this a little bit. We do a whole entire webinar on that, on what to do with the family home, and definitely encourage you to look out for those episodes as well. There's a wealth of information on there about how things are taxed and all that. So. But the home is going to be most likely the biggest asset that's going to have to be divided up, sold, or capped, or whatever we do. Okay. Retirement accounts, most likely going to be the second biggest one. 401k options, pension plans, property division. How is that 401k plan going to be divided up? Is there a pension plan? That pension plan has a value today. but there is very, very specific steps that have to be taken in order for those to be divided up. And professionals like myself supporting those through divorce, we do things what they call quadros, qualified domestic relations order, and that is something that is sent over to the plan administrator outlining how the 401k should be divided up and things like that. Okay. I'll touch a little bit more on this in when I start to go through the pitfalls of taking withdrawals from retirement accounts and how important the timing is of that to avoid paying penalties and things like that. If there's any small businesses, family businesses owned, okay, that's going to require the appraisal from a business appraiser. I don't do that kind of stuff. Attorneys don't typically do that kind of stuff. That requires some specialty work to have the business appraised. But there again, what do you do with it? Do you continue working together? Do you let one person have the business? Do you sell the business, altogether? And then, of course, personal property, investment accounts, savings accounts, furniture, whatever, the pots and the pans, if they're that meaningful, all that personal property is going to be divided up in a very fair and equitable manner. Okay, and then lastly, the debt. All right. If there is debt that's accrued, um, this can be a real kind of confusing area for some because with debt, the divorce decree, you may settle on the one person if there's joint debt. One person may take that debt as a part of the settlement in lieu of maybe another asset or something like that. However, if that debt is joint debt, just because the decree says that Mark has to pay for it, you could still be on the hook if that's not paid. So the obligation is still joint obligation. Even though the decree says that Mark or Sarah is going to pay for it, doesn't matter. That is still considered joint debt. Should they default on it, the creditors can come after both parties that are on that debt. Okay. Boy, what to do with this family home? More often than not, it's an emotional decision right off the bat. We don't want to do that to the kids. We don't want to uproot it. They love it here. It's a great neighborhood. Da, 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 da. But the reality is, can you afford to keep the home? Can you afford to put the new roof on? Can you afford to write a check out of personal funds when something goes wrong? Damage of any kinds or repairs need to be made or something like that, does it make sense for, a divided family to stay in a 4 or 5 thousand square foot home with all the utilities and things like that? So right away, the emotional aspect of the house, the emotional decision making of the home has to be kind of thrown out the window, and we have to really look at this from a very, very realistic standpoint. Okay. First and foremost, if the home gets sold, if there's capital gains on that, what happens? Who has to claim it? What do we do with that? So any individual may exclude $250,000 of gains or $500,000 if the house is in both names upon the sale of the house. Okay, now how do you really calculate what that equity is? And it's simply going to be the purchase price of the home plus any improvements, which is different than repairs. Repairs don't get counted in. Okay. If you need a new sump pump, that doesn't count. If you need a new furnace, doesn't count. The repairs are the repairs, but improvements, maybe it's an additional bedroom, maybe another finished space or something like that, that is going to go on to the cost basis of the home. All right. So the cost basis of the home, then that's your cost basis is going to be taken away from whatever the market price was at the time of sale, minus any closing costs. Okay. So here again, mortgages, the balance, that kind of stuff doesn't really come into play. It's the equity, on the home. So that's what happens when there's a sale of the home. Now, other ways you can do that is you can transfer ownership. One person can stay in the house, refinance it, buy the other person out. That a lot of times is a very a common step to take with the home is that the spouse that's going to stay there, they refinance it under their own name and everything like that, and then they just buy the other party out. There's also a quitclaim deed. Now, be careful with these because with these, it may take the name of the spouse off the ownership of the house, but it does not take them off the mortgage. So they can still be liable for any missed mortgage payments or anything like that should it come to realization that keeping the home is not financially feasible and somebody gets behind on mortgage payments. There's a very clean way to break away from the home, and that is to make sure everybody, the only people on the mortgage and on the title of the home are the ones living there and paying the mortgage. So be careful of those. But those are really the most common conversations that we have that we deal with is, trying to get behind a lot of the emotion of keeping the family home. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, it works out okay, whether you stay or you stay or you go. But sometimes keeping that big family home just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, talk about retirement plans a little bit. Social Security. Now, Social Security doesn't really come into play until this is more of a conversation with those in that gray divorce area, over the age of 60 for widowers. But if both parties are eligible to receive Social Security and they've been married at least 10 years, they're entitled to each other's Social Security benefits. And it's only going to be, it's really not that complicated. Really, what they're going to be entitled to is just the higher of either their own or half of the ex-spouses. Whatever's higher, they get to claim that. Okay. Um, but Social Security really doesn't come into play, like I said, unless you're in that gray divorce area and you're over the age of 60 or Social Security eligible is 62. Does that come into play? Retirement plans, probably going to be the second biggest asset discussed in the divorce. And, how do we do these retirement plans? What money's taxable? What's not taxable? How do we get to the pension and the 401(k) and all that sort of stuff? What do we do with the IRAs? I mentioned this term quadro that you see on the screen here, a qualified domestic relations order. And what we do is we use those to provide qualified plans. And when we say qualified plans, those usually mean your company's plans, 401(k) or pension plan. Okay. IRAs don't require that. What IRAs require to split up or transfer is simply the divorce decree. And then the custodian will simply go by what's in the divorce decree and move the assets to a new account, new name, all that kind of stuff. So now, if you've got two individuals or both career individuals, let's say we got two engineers from Ford Motor Company, General Motors, something like that, they got their own pensions, their own SSIP, 401(k) plans, you name it. Then typically the retirement plans are sort of a moot point. Now, I want to talk a little bit about distributions out of these plans because a lot of times when assets get divided up, maybe there's going to be a distribution taken to pay for attorney fees to get going on your feet, whatever the case may be. Maybe you're keeping the home and you gotta get all the utilities up and running and all this sort of stuff. You need some upfront cash. Now, with retirement plans, it is absolutely essential that the plan administrator, 401(k) plans, pension plans, I'll talk 401(k) plans, um, it's absolutely essential that the 401(k) for the plan administrator knows that you want to take a withdrawal out of there because it's a one-time shot. And when you do a one-time shot pursuant to a divorce, you can go under the IRS code section 72T. And what 72T allows you to do is to take a distribution from these under the age of 59 and a half, that's key, but you can take a distribution from a qualified plan without paying the tax penalty. But it's a one-time shot. If you decide 30 days later, you hear about this and you want to take some money out, too bad, it's not allowed. You're going to pay both taxes and penalties. So again, very, very important if there's retirement plans involved to consider any kind of cash flow needs or anything like that where a distribution may be required out of that qualified plan. Okay? So, by the way, I didn't, I forgot to mention it right off the bat here. I just want to take a moment to mention this. Andrea Whitener is on the call with us. She is our moderator for today. So if there's any Q&A questions or anything that I go over, please type them in the chat, or raise your hand. Andrea will field those questions and we'll tackle those at the end. So, Okay. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning that we have Andre on here. So whose name you probably recognize if you got the invite. But let's go through these pitfalls that we see. The most common pitfalls of divorce. I went through these same pitfalls, okay? And we see these today. And again, the goal here today is to give you a lot of clarity and confidence so you can maybe tackle some of these. Maybe that process makes it that much smoother, maybe that much cost effective. Okay. Pitfall number one, not enough cash. Okay. Divorce is a very, very cash hungry situation. Every time you send an email to the attorney, every time you pick up the phone call, there are legal fees. The clock is running. There's hourly rates. Meetings are expensive. Gathering assets can be expensive. Divorce is it just breathes cash. It just wants cash. Everything costs money in a divorce. Okay. So, number one, not having enough of that set aside. And what that's going to do, of course, it's going to give you some empowerment and some independence. All right. So, um, here again, your sources of cash can be savings, can be investments. Um, Careful with the credit cards, okay? The last thing, divorce can be expensive enough. The last thing we want to see is you walking out of divorce with a whole big giant ball of debt that you have to now stare at every time. Same thing with home equity lines too. It can be a source, but again, if the family home is at stake here, need to be very careful taking that debt out, okay? Of course, friends and family, they're probably going to be the closest resources that we have. You know, um, so they could always be a source of cash if need be. All right. Loans from retirement plans, that's possible. If you have a 401k, you're allowed to take loans from that. You cannot take loans from IRAs. But you certainly can take IRA withdrawals, which is the absolute last resort, because of the taxes and the penalty situation. You need $10,000. Okay, you're going to have to take out maybe $15,000 or 12,000, 13,000 just to cover the taxes, on that distribution. So very, very important to understand and know where your liquid cash resources are. Not only that, once you know what they are, where they are, what are the consequences of getting that cash out? And these are things that you can do in the meantime if you are in the very, very early stages of divorce, considering it, start to get your ducks in a row. Okay. I mean, too little preparation. I don't think it's on anybody's bingo card to go through a divorce at some point in their life. So, I don't know how you can ever be so fully prepared for a divorce. However, there are things you can do, steps you can take to prepare you for what may be in store. Okay. And again, preparation, knowing knowledge is power, can make you feel a little bit less afraid. Divorce is not only cash hungry, it's an emotionally charged event. Okay. Decision making, very poor decision making happens a lot under charged emotions. So, being a little bit prepared, having some expectations of how the process may go, having some expectations they might not go your way. Okay. Talk to your attorney before you start talking to, the spouse and trying to hash out anything, kind of behind the scenes. If an attorney is retained, the divorce process is rolling, talk to your attorney. Okay. As far as Social Security, support, family situations, that's pretty case by case scenario. If there's handicaps in the family or anything like that to take into consideration, there again, preparation and for how that's going to look, kind of playing that tape all the way to the end, what that might look like on your own, taking care of this person, that person, or whatever the case may be, is going to give you a little bit, that much more stability in the beginning process and make much better decisions. Okay. Um, Here's another thing too. Get into shape before you go. Fix the car, buy the clothes, whatever you have to do, get dental work done, the property, the home, if it needs landscaping, get all that stuff done now, because getting it all done now is not going to be an item when it comes time to divorce, and you're out of your divorce, you're trying to get on your feet, you're trying to reinvent yourself, find this new life, this new place, new friends maybe, and all that sort of stuff. the last thing is you want to be burdened down by just fixing the car so you can go to work, or reinventing yourself, having to go out and buy it. Get all that stuff done beforehand if at all possible, okay? Because there again, we got broken down cars, things like that. I mean, that can kind of come into play too, a little bit into settlements, but very wise to kind of get those things, those boxes checked off a little bit. Okay. If there's, safety deposit boxes, things like that, making sure you know where they are, how to get to them, what the combination is, it's like that. Number three, having no records. What did you pay for this? No idea. What did you do? When did you get this? I don't have a clue. Document, 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 document. Okay. There again, I don't believe divorce is on anybody's bingo card in life. So it's not like the day you get married, you got to document all this because you know you're going to get divorced someday. No. But if things are going sideways and this big D word is in the air and it's a serious consideration, it is so absolutely crucial to document. Make copies of everything you can find, of your tax returns, of your 401(k) statements, of savings accounts, all that kind of stuff. You know, tax returns, to say go read your tax returns they can be a completely different language for most people, but they are definitely a place to where you can understand where the money is and what comes in and what goes out, things like that. Of course, bank statements, credit card statements, making sure you know where all the debt is, who owns what, checking accounts, logins, all that kind of stuff. List out your assets and debts. And then, any of that separate property that I talked about, things that were kind of before the marriage, that were brought into the marriage, get a handle on that separate property, what it is, where it is, things like that. Any kind of documentation is certainly number one. It's going to help everybody on the team to come up with a settlement, a fair, equitable settlement, number one. Number two, it's going to save you a lot of money in paying attorneys and people like myself time to kind of track all this down for you. So the more you can document and bring with you, the better off it's going to be for everybody. Okay. Much smoother process. All right. Here's a bunch of overlooked stuff. A lot of they call them career assets or frequent flyer points. How many Delta Sky miles are accumulated, and those could be an item. Those could certainly be an item. Any equipment, hobby, collections, artwork, those kinds of things, hold value. As I mentioned, career, any degrees, those are going to come into play when it comes down to, child support, or I should say, spousal support, things like that. Okay. Um, the business assets, if there are any, how are those going to be valued? As I mentioned, business appraiser has to do the business evaluation. That's just another professional you put on your team, if that's need be. Here's a big one: retirement plans. Okay, overlooking the former employer's 401(k) plans that have been floating out there for decades, or maybe a couple of those old IRA accounts that you opened up back when you could take the tax deduction, and that's what people did every year. They just walked into the bank and they opened up a new IRA and made the contribution. We see a lot of those just outside of the divorce that, oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot about, I was a teacher 20 years ago at whatever school system, and my plan's still sitting there. So that's a real big one, is getting a handle, getting your finger on, any of those old employer plans, old IRA accounts, Roth IRA accounts, stuff like that have just simply slipped through the cracks, over the years. So, um, retirement plan. There's a lot of nuances in the retirement planning, in the retirement planning space here. that I just want to cover. And again, sitting down with somebody like me, and you've got, you're in engine. I deal with a tremendous amount of engineers. I'm in Birmingham, Detroit area. We've got the big three, so everybody seems to be an engineer. So we see a lot of pensions, 401ks, things like that, that have to be, that have to be dealt with. And as I mentioned, there's a process there using the quadros. IRAs don't need them. They just need the divorce decree. So pursuant to a divorce, assets can be exchanged between parties without any kind of tax or penalty. The only time tax or penalties come into play is really when distributions come about. Okay, so when you have to start taking money out of there. But to split them up, it doesn't really require. It just requires the quadros in the divorce decree. Now, federal employees, military benefits, things like that. I won't go into those today. They kind of have their own formulas in terms of how that is, divided up based upon deployment, years of deployment and service and things like that. So. But a lot of moving parts in the retirement plans, more than there are in the, in the sale of the marital home, or dividing up the artwork or whatever. Retirement plans require very, very specific steps to be taken. So again, there aren't any unwanted tax penalty consequences that we could have easily avoided. Okay. Number five, ignoring the tax consequences, and here again, the sale of the home, if the home has been owned for a really, really long time, there could be potential that the capital gains is going to exceed that $250,000. So understanding how much you need to claim as a single filer is absolutely important. The tax consequences of retirement plan distributions. Okay. Providers are required to withhold money for income taxes. Under the age of 59 and a half, if you're taking a distribution, not only are you going to pay taxes, but you're going to pay an additional 10% penalty too, unless there is that 72T provision pursuant to a divorce that you can use to avoid the 10% penalties for withdrawals out of the retirement accounts. Okay. Now, a lot of times that gets looked over because if we don't have any of that in place, we're ignoring the tax consequences, and you're going to be paying, you're going to pay your ordinary income taxes and the 10% penalty on top of that. Um, Claiming children for tax purposes, okay? Claiming children as dependents. You either get the earned income credit or you can do the child care deduction depending on who the custodial parent is. But those are things to take into consideration of how that's going to look, going forward. All right. As I mentioned, the taxes issues regarding the sale of the home, capital gains in there. Same, like pension plans and the qualified money, that's all pre-tax money. The IRS has not gotten their hands on that yet, and they just are waiting to when you take a distribution. So making sure that we have our finger on the pulse of what tax consequences may look like for you in the event that you need money out of those assets that were awarded to you. Okay. Kind of went through the family home already a little bit, the options there. You buy one spouse out of the other. You can sell, you won't pay the taxes on the $250,000 gain. Maybe there's arrangements where the home gets sold after a little while. Maybe one spouse lives in it. The kid's school district's there and everything like that, and it just all makes sense. And then they sell the house. That is all going to be in the decree and things like that. And like I said, can you really afford it? You got to consider all this. Can you really afford, the house? When does it need a new roof? I got a roofing estimate the other day and wow. Wow, they're expensive, and so it's things like that that we always want to take into consideration. And working with the professionals in the divorce area, like ourselves, the ones that have really kind of gone through it, we know those things. We can bring those realities because we're living those in our new chapter here. So number six, believing ignorance is bliss. I just want it over. This isn't fair. It's everybody's fault. You need to take a real active role in this, in this process because If it's just I want to get it over with, I just don't care, give me whatever half of this is, boy, oh boy, a lot of times that doesn't pay out well in the end, you know? And so taking an active role of the kind of lifestyle that you want to live, what your life may look like after this, having those, you know, kind of those beacons, if you will, set out, you can make much better decisions going through the process, whether or not those decisions are good for you and your kids or not. You know, like I said, keep the house, sure, keep the house, great location, but my goodness, 5,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, you know, a gas and electricity bill on a home that size, you know, you're going to be well, probably over $1,000 a month and a few utilities, I would imagine, you know. So, um, please, 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 you know, take an active role in this. Gain as much knowledge as you can. Attend my webinars, anybody else's webinar. Second Saturday is they're all over the country, and I'm willing to bet there's a leader probably in your neck of the woods. You know, of course, you know, anything you can reach out to us as well, you know, to provide some clarity on that. Money and emotion, doesn't matter if you're divorced or not, emotions and money just go hand in hand. They really, really do. And the first, you know, thing, remember the attorneys are there for a reason, and they are not therapists, they are not financial advisors, they are not, your best friend or anything like that. So again, you know, you're working with attorney, be conscious of those costs, you know, because it is a pretty expensive cry session in an attorney's office if you so choose to do it there, you know. Um, you know, you know, maybe trying to you know, mixing those revengeful emotions, the resentments, whatever anger, anything that's coming out of there, boiling out of a divorce, you know, whatever happened, mixing those emotions with your money don't usually lead to very good outcomes. You know, usually the outcomes are, oh no, why'd I do that? You know, I could have done it much differently, and I wish I would have. So, when we're working with individuals, you know, supporting individuals going through the divorce, you know, the last thing we want them is having any kind of regrets over, you know, the decisions that they made. And you know, most often that's what we see is that when there's a very emotionally charged decision around money, it's usually not, you know, the best financial decision at the end of the day. Right? Um, you know, fight for what's not yours. I mean, you know, yeah, just take everything. I want to be a nice guy. No, you know, that's not how this is. You know, it has to be fair. And you know, there should be no shame in underestimating your value if you're going through a divorce and what you deserve, you know, especially like the kids' needs, you know, they are at the center of all of it, you know, and that is very, very important to remain invested in their lives. You know, maybe the custody arrangements aren't what you want them, and they're more, you know, more parenting time is awarded to the other spouse than you. That doesn't mean you take a back seat in the parenting roles. So fighting for what's yours is very, very important. You know, and you know, it can work quite well in your case, going through a divorce, you know, and not taking control, kind of the same along the same lines. Listen, numbers 8, 9 here, these are really about kind of your own boundaries and what you want for your life, you know, and this completely new chapter. And, what we do is we carry the individual, after the papers are signed and everything that, you know, we carry the individual through that and helping them plan for for this new chapter of their life. And this is one thing I drill home a lot is, take control, learn about your bank, learn about investments, learn about what we do, learn about, how the bank accounts work and all that kind of stuff, learn about how life insurance works and be aware of what those needs may look like should you, come down with a terminal illness. Are you prepared, so it doesn't become a burden on, children and things like that. So the same kind of needs for control and planning and things like that post-divorce, they're every bit as important post-divorce as they are if you're happily married and moving along in life and need, to ensure that the assets are protected and things like that. So, okay. And lastly, this is your divorce, not ours, not the attorneys, not mine. This is yours. We're here to certainly support you, and my job is to, simply present scenarios. It's not to give legal advice or anything like that, but is to work with the individual on their different scenarios and ultimately support you so you can make the best decision for yourself. But I'm not here to make that for you, and neither is the attorney or CPA or, therapist. We're all here to support you. Okay. So, um, not being ready for the worst, I mean, how any of us, I don't know if any of us can be totally prepared for the worst, but there again, life is moving on here. It doesn't mean a lot of the stuff doesn't matter anymore. And those are the points I'm really trying to, kind of drive home here is that life is still going to go on. The world is going to keep turning, and we need to have you prepared for the best of it. And worst case scenario situations. We want you to live your life too. We don't want you to, to abandon that, sitting around just in a constant state of worry of, my gosh, what might happen next? Could be sitting there worried about getting divorced again, and heck, you're not even remarried yet. So, um, not developing a career, we all have potential, we all have potential, and we totally understand that not everybody may be in the best position to get out there and, gain more education and start a business or another career or make a career change for that matter. We understand that, but this is more just invest in yourself, investing in yourself and your knowledge. If it means, just gaining a little bit more knowledge to help you gain a little bit edge out there, by all means, we are all for it. If you have the potential to go back and pursue that marketing degree or whatever it was, that nursing degree you wanted 25 years ago and decided to stay home, we support that. And, we feel that is something very, very important for that individual to do going through the divorce process, especially obviously post-divorce process. But this is going to give you that sense of renewal, and you're going to be promise you take good care of yourself and better yourself in career and things like that. Life is going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. But invest in yourself on this one. And lastly, not getting good advice, I mean, that happens, there's a lot of nuances of divorce and dividing assets and custody arrangements and, alimony payments, all this kind of stuff that CDFAs and attorneys are there for, however, like I said, this is your divorce, not the attorneys, not the CDFAs, not the therapist divorce. And unfortunately, like a lot of professions, yeah, there can be a few bad apples out there who just are in it for themselves. And we want to tell you to empower your kind of your spidey senses in that. And if you feel that this isn't about you, it's more about them. Hey, you can switch attorneys, you can switch other professionals quite easily if you're not feeling it. But there again, the last thing I want to say, it may be hard to determine if you're getting good advice or not, because it's not like this is something everybody goes through a couple times in their life, and it's like, oh yeah, last time, maybe. But if you're going through a divorce and you plan on for this one being your last one, look for the credentials. Of course, referrals are always a really strong source. If you have somebody that went through a divorce and they seem to be happy with how things were handled and what happened, they're a great resource for good advice out there. So, that's a path that I took. I didn't really, go out Googling attorneys and reading reviews. I went to a very trusted source and said, this is what's going on. This is what's happening, and I got great advice, and I got such great advice that now this is what I get to do for a living. I get to carry my experience, strength, and hope to other individuals going through exactly what I went through. And to be able to put myself eyeball to eyeball with somebody in that and meet somebody there, is the bright spot of my career after 22 years. So even in my own divorce, I have 10 years later been now able to rediscover myself, myself too. So we're all in this, we're all in this journey together here, and let's make it a great one. So we're wrapping up on time here. We've got about 5 minutes left of the hour. What you have on your screen here are some QR codes and some website address. These are my websites. Of course, my office phone number there. But there is a QR code if you want to connect with me on the social media platforms of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, where we post a tremendous amount of divorce-related content, very helpful. That's a great way to stay connected and kind of, of course, stay on top of our webinar topics, things like that. Maybe that one in May or maybe one 6 months from now might resonate to you. And, we want to encourage you to stay in touch with us. And that way, you can even receive the replay. So this is being recorded today. And everybody who's registered is going to get, a replay of this. So, but connecting on the social media is the best way to kind of stay in touch and engaged, and it, maybe makes that quick little phone call that much easier that you've been wanting to make. Or you can, you can scan the QR code of my calendar right there, and that will bring up a calendar where you can book a first time meeting with me. There's no cost or obligation to have a conversation, but if you feel I'm a good person to maybe have a talk with and kind of sort of get your head around this thing. And, everybody, let's face it, divorce comes up, everybody sees the dollar signs. Everything comes up in our field of vision that's got a dollar sign in front of it. So if talking to somebody like me, would help out a little bit, then scheduling a meeting with me is a great first step to do that. So, but that pretty much concludes it for today. We stayed right on time today, which is great. Andrea, did you field any Q&A at all during the presentation? I can leave the last 4 minutes open for any of that if there's anything to address.
It looks like we're all good on questions as of now, but of course, if anyone has any, feel free to pop it in the chat and I can read those off.
Great. Well, that tells me I gave an absolutely perfect presentation then. I answered all the questions, but no, we understand, hey, right now this is a very private, a very, kind of thing that people go through in their lives, and we understand confidentiality and privacy and things like that. So, again, scheduling a meeting is a great way to kind of tap into some of those things and find out more. So, if there are no Q&As at this time, I'm going to wrap everything up. I'm going to let everybody get on with their Saturday afternoon. If you're in our area, the Midwest, Detroit, it looks like we've got an absolutely beautiful day. Finally, we're getting out of the winter doldrums. But wherever you're at today, watching this or watching the replay, we wish you the best, and we're here to support you on your journey. We know this is not the easiest thing to go through, and we're happy to answer any questions and support you in any way we can. So, Andrea, thank you so much for being on today as well, keeping everything running smooth and making sure that everybody got the content and the invites and all that. You do great work. Glad you're part of the team. And, for those of you out there this morning watching, enjoy your day. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And, we're here to help. So, until next month, everybody, thank you again for joining today. And that concludes it. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care and bye for now.